Hi friends, I'm Sarah Baldwin and I'm back with another Sunday with Sarah for you. It's summertime here in Maine and today I'm at the Ashwood Waldorf School in Rockport, Maine, where I taught kindergarten for many years. And while I taught here, the children come outside in the playground in the woods behind us, and one of their favorite things to do was to build fairy houses. So today I've invited a very special guest, my friend Liza Gardner Walsh, who is the author of the Fairy House Handbook and the Fairy Garden Handbook, and her newest book, which just came out this month, Treasure Hunter's Handbook. You'll find all of these books at Bella Luna Toys, but today we're going to talk about fairy house building. So welcome, Liza. Thank you so much for being here. Can you start by telling us a little bit about the history of fairy house building?
Yes, thank you so much for having me here, Sarah. I'm a big fan of Bella Luna Toys. And as far as I know, the history of fairy house building originated in Maine, mostly on the islands. And it is a hobby that people have been doing for generations here with their children. Grandparents are involved, and it's now taken off into a little bit more of a mainstream activity for people all throughout the country, but it really does have its roots in the coastal area of Maine.
But you don't have to live in Maine to build a fairy house, right? And just you could build fairy houses anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
What if you live on the beach or?
That's the wonderful thing about fairy houses. They're incredibly adaptable. Really all you need is a little patch of grass. You could work, if you had a patio, you could do a container garden. If you live in a city and you have access to a city park, many cities now have fairy house trails. Beaches are wonderful for fairy house building because of driftwood and shells and just the building component of sand. So their fairy houses really can be built anywhere, I would say, in the world, even the desert, or just as long as there's a little bit of natural material and kids can add their own bits of natural materials from hikes and other adventures, and they can bring it back and add it to their fairy house.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I've also invited some younger friends today, and they've been off in the woods gathering materials to build their fairy houses. So let's go find them.
Right. Are you ready to build fairy houses today? Have you ever seen a fairy? I have to say I haven't either. But have you built fairy houses?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times?
Yep.
Yes? What's your favorite thing to do when you build fairy houses?
Find the diamonds.
Ooh, find the diamonds. How about you, Claire?
Find things for the fairy.
Gather things and stuff. Do you know about some of the rules of fairy house building? They're sort of the rules of the forest, really, when you're building a fairy house. Do you know what some of them are? What's the rule of fairy house?
No trying to kill trees and then get the bark from them.
Yeah. So, were you going to say something else, Claire?
Not to get things from nature, but I do a lot.
That's so important, right? There's one really important rule about fairy house building, and I call it the Monhegan rule, because fairy houses started on Month Island and Monhegan, and people were going out there and they were bringing lots of man-made materials, marbles and glittery things, and it was littering the woods, and it was changing the habitat. Do you know what that means, where the animals live? So the really big rule for fairy house building is just to use what you find in nature and not to bring man-made materials. So that's really important. So what do you think the first thing to do when you go out in the woods and think about fairy house building is?
I don't know.
What would you do first?
Build a fairy house.
Would you find a place to build one?
Mm-hmm.
And Claire already said she likes to build them in the hollows of trees. Sometimes it's nice if you find a big stone to rest your fairy house on. Sometimes you could find a nice stump, too. And then what about getting the supplies you need? Gathering your supplies, right? And then just building your fairy house. And Do you ever like to make things for inside of your fairy house? What kind of accessory? I call them accessories. You know that word?
I love to put acorns in there.
Acorns? What else do you like to put in? Do you make fairy beds? They need a bed, right?
I make them in mussel shells.
I brought some mussel shells. Mussel shells are great beds in bathtubs, too. Oh, and what about, do you ever make a fairy door for your fairy house? Out of, maybe if you find a piece of bark, you can make a fairy door.
I just leave a space.
You just leave a nice space open for them. Great. How about that? Do you ever make a walkway into your fairy house?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Yeah. All right. Are you ready to build fairy houses? Okay. Should we gather some materials and find a spot to do it?
Yeah.
Okay.